Hello everybody, and welcome to the 50th episode of Some Patches Required. My name is, has been, and shall yet remain Aaron.
And my name's Zach.
And this week is going to be kind of an interesting, well, it's already been several interesting weeks, but this episode specifically will be interesting. But before we get to our main topic, which concerns what else but the ongoing kind of drama regarding the Helena Taylor voice acting situation and a lot of its larger implications. I would first like to just thank everyone who's stuck with us for 50 episodes. If you started at number 1, you are an absolute rock star. If you're brand new to the show, thank you so much for being with us. And if you would like to share the episode with a friend, share the show with a friend, give us a like on your podcatcher of choice, follow us, grab our RSS feed, anything you can do to spread the word or, just continue listening. We really appreciate that. And then before I let Zach get a word in edgewise, I do just kind of want to give a cheesy tease, if you will, for the fact that right at the end of the episode, we're going to be talking about a couple of interesting changes that are coming to Some Patches Required in the coming months. So please do stay tuned for that if you would be so kind.
Yeah, and if for whatever reason you're listening to this and the topic doesn't end up interesting you, or if you're not interested in the topic at some point, I would recommend checking out the end just to see what we are concocting, so to speak.
Absolutely. And I will say the only major change that we are, I'm not happy to announce it, but the only thing that we're going to announce at the moment is that, of course, I will be replaced by Liam Hemsworth for future episodes.
Yeah, it took a long time for us to get that push through, but I'm really happy about what I was able to do. Been trying to kick Aaron off the show for a little bit, but
this is true.
It took a while.
We eventually decided that I was just too handsome and too cut for the podcasting world, so we decided to bring Liam on. I'm not super happy about it, but I'll deal. I'll make it work.
We'll deal. Well, without further ado, I guess we can spill some tea.
Is it hot tea?
It won't scold you.
Okay, I was gonna say ow, but
yeah, no, there won't be any 3rd-degree burns.
That's good. That's good. 1st or 2nd degree, I'm fine with. So I know we're a little bit late to the party on this one, but there was just nothing else like super crazy going on in the industry with enough substance to like bring to like a larger conversation. And we didn't realize exactly how large this conversation was going to get before we started digging into it and researching it. But if you are not familiar with the story of Bayonetta 3 and the voice acting kerfuffle that has come out of it, then time to educate yourself, because Hachimachi, it is a wild ride. Zach, do you want to get us started with the conversation so that I don't accidentally bloviate and make Liam Hemsworth jealous?
Yeah, well, I think the only other thing that I would like to say just ahead of time is that there are a lot of things that have kind of come out that maybe don't make Helena Taylor look like she's the best kind of individual. We're not really as interested in hitting on that. That certainly is part of the drama, but the majority of what we're interested in talking about here is more around the fact that it really opens up this interesting conversation around voice acting. So that's what I was gonna say before jumping into the specifics.
Huge important caveat before you lead us into this. In no way are we making like supreme moral judgments on anybody. We're not trying to make anyone look bad. We're not doing a slam piece. We're not BuzzFeed. This is not our intention in any way whatsoever. So take everything we say as like just kind of analysis, not necessarily opinion, until we get to the heavily opinionated stuff.
Yeah.
closer towards the end.
Yep. But without further ado, I shall spill some tea, which is that so
Ow.
yeah, and it hurts.
It was still warm.
Still warm. But Bayonetta 3 came out not too long ago, but I believe a week before it came out. One of the voice actors, or actually the voice actor for Bayonetta in Bayonetta 1 and Bayonetta 2, came out on Twitter with 4 different videos talking about her experience working with Platinum Games, who of course is the studio behind Bayonetta, and making some pretty big statements about her relationship with them. Really kind of the first thing, and probably the thing that stirred a lot of the initial conversation around underpayment in the games industry when it comes to voice actors, is one of her videos talked about how she had spent like 7+ years of her life working on this franchise, and on the final game they were only going to offer her a total of $4,000 for her role as, the main character in the third entry in the series, and that really sparked
Bayonetta.
Yeah, exactly. And like people, love this character. I would argue, I don't know much about Helena Taylor herself, but just knowing like people who like really kind of like wacky, outlandish characters, I'm sure she had some kind of following. So it definitely sparked a fairly big conversation on social media.
Yeah, and I think another huge part of that is the fact that the Bayonetta character herself has been such like a strong female character, very, very much in charge of her own sexuality. The games themselves are very they're bizarre and kind of erotic, and a lot of Bayonetta's personality is kind of tied in with that. So it was this interesting example of a female character who was in no way controlled or influenced by traditionally male characters, and just kicked a bunch of ass and owned her sexy, and that attached her to a lot of people, and a lot of what made her character stick in a lot of people's minds was the voice acting of Helena Taylor. So obviously the news that she was only going to be offered about $4,000 for the entirety of her role in a game like Bayonetta 3, which is a AAA production, it ruffled some feathers, clearly. And I'm assuming most people who listen to the show would be aware of that by now, but yeah, it was a pretty big stink.
Yeah.
And then the narrative changed.
Yeah, the narrative definitely changed quite a bit. What basically ended up happening was certain sources like Jason Schreier and VCG, different outlets. Jason Schreier is really the most important one, if I'm being honest. But a bunch of
via Bloomberg, yeah,
via Bloomberg came out saying.
By the way, Jason Schreier is the second patron saint of Some Patches Required. So please.
That is true. We do reference the man a lot. But he came out on Twitter saying that he had seen documentation from Platinum Games and contracts specifically saying that the amount Helena Taylor was actually going to get was closer to $15,000 overall. And, as the story kind of thickened even more, there was discussion over the fact that the reason Taylor actually wasn't brought back onto the set or however you would refer to it. Set's a little bit more like film and television.
Into the studio.
Yeah, the studio was that she wanted to get royalties and was looking to get paid somewhere in the 6-figure range. And so obviously 15K is a little bit more money than 4K.
4,000.
Yeah. So
yeah.
Shed some
I've
light.
never been the world's greatest mathematician, but something doesn't line quite up in there.
Well, also it brought up the whole thing, and I think you mentioned this during our initial conversation, that it really illustrates one of two things. Either Taylor is really horrible at communicating and just shouldn't have a Twitter account, or she purposely misled people by omission and made them think she was getting paid a substantially smaller amount for her work on the game.
Yeah. Yeah, which is where we get into a little bit of an issue. Like you said, she either thoroughly miscommunicated in an attempt to bring attention to voice actors being underpaid, or she wanted to purposefully distort the data to bring this conversation up, or she just wanted to purposefully distort the data because she thought that for whatever reason she wasn't being appropriately compensated.
Yeah.
It's so like confusing, and we obviously can't figure out, like, we don't know Helena Taylor, we don't know what goes on in her head, but the entire story took so many twists and turns over the course of a week or two that we thought it would be worth kind of looking at that entire topic. And it's so I'm still like, even after a couple of weeks of like looking into this, it's still actually hard to like figure out what is exactly going on, because there just aren't rock solid answers for it. And add to that the fact that Miss Taylor did initially hold firm on the 4,000 total thing,
Yeah.
before eventually walking that back, which makes her specifically look worse in this situation.
Mm-hmm.
Not ideal, but it is part of the story.
Yeah, and I think the important thing that I kind of accidentally skipped past when I first was talking about the videos is that she specifically kind of referenced the 2017 VA strike, or actually, sorry, she didn't specifically reference it, but it really, like, it was very clear that she was referencing the issue of a lack of pay within the games industry when it comes to voice actors. And so she was really kind of, rallying the troops, so to speak, behind this issue, which is, as you will soon learn, a very real issue.
Yeah.
What is complicated about the Helena Taylor situation is that what ended up coming out is that she's actually making quite a bit more than what the minimum wage is for voice actors in SAG, which is the union that they're in. And she was actually supposed to make more than she had on the previous 2 games. So, it was, the only reason I bring any of that up is more to say that Platinum Games doesn't appear to be trying to screw her out of money. They could have gotten into a disagreement about how much she is worth, and she is definitely able to step away if she doesn't feel she's getting adequately paid. That's fine. But she definitely tried to cast this kind of image that Platinum Games was manipulating her, I think, pretty heavily, and all of the information seems to suggest that wasn't the case. What's important to know, though, is that this people are definitely being taken advantage of, for sure.
Yeah. Which again is another thing that we'll talk about later on, but it's a problem of framing yet again. To go back to framing, the conversation is one worth having. This may have just been the worst possible way to have it. And it also doesn't help that the guy who made, or like the guy who's in charge of especially Bayonetta is notoriously, to put it generously, curmudgeonly in his interactions with fans, especially on Twitter. So there was a lot of hate initially directed towards Platinum Games when they thought that they had replaced a voice actor who'd brought so much to a role with another voice actress, Jennifer Hale, who is exceptionally talented. She played Shepard in Mass Effect and a bunch of other roles. And people found this like easily dislikable sort of character of a studio man, and the idea of a studio itself can sometimes be inherently dislikable, and a lot of hate was levied at that. A lot of hate was levied at Jennifer Hale, who took over the role, and almost certainly actually didn't know any of this until Helena Taylor broke her NDA and brought all this information out. So it was really easy to hate on everybody, and then the rest of it came out, and suddenly Helena Taylor is getting all of this hate, and it's just turned into a conversational shitstorm.
Yeah.
Of astronomical proportions. It's the entire conversation has been lost at this point. So it's again just a wild conversation to have that is all around the actual conversation we should be having.
Yeah. And I think kind of to just illustrate those that know the Jimquisition and their style of reporting on things, Stephanie Starling was very pro Jennifer Hale, but also more specifically Helena Taylor at the beginning. And I believe as of last Monday, the Jimquisition published an episode talking about how all good faith in their eyes was lost from Helena Taylor. And like I said, at this point, it gets really close to being kind of a let's talk about their political views and all these other things and why they're bad. And it's like, we're not curious about that. What I am curious and just exploring very quickly is the negative impact that this all has on the conversation, because now, because Taylor lied, voice actors that come out and have critiques of studios or have criticisms are now going to be looked at and scrutinized because Taylor either miscommunicated or at worst lied, purposely withheld information. And then on top of that, you mentioned Jennifer Hale, Aaron, a few times. There were some weird interactions between Helena Taylor and Jennifer Hale online. And I would argue that one specific Twitter post that Taylor had at Jennifer Hale stating that Jennifer Hale would never be Bayonetta was particularly kind of like passive aggressive and perhaps something that could incite antagonism against Jennifer Hale, who, as you mentioned also, Aaron, does not deserve any hate for this situation. She simply, just took up a job.
Yeah. And to kind of just jump off of that point, when you're someone as high profile as Jennifer Hale, you're probably not, pounding the pavement searching for jobs, right? There are probably people coming to you. You probably have an agent. You've voiced some of the bigger characters in gaming, but she didn't ask for the role. She just took a job. And as we're going to talk about here in a couple of moments, there's no real reason to think that it's just so much. All she did was take a job. And when you're a voice actor, a working voice performer, even in the games industry, even at that level, there's no guarantee of, consistent employment. There's no guarantee of anything beyond contract work, realistically. And even, well-paid voice actors, well-known voice actors aren't necessarily always paid what you'd get if, you were, starring in the next Avengers film. There's a huge different thing. So all she did was take a job. And like I said earlier, odds are she didn't know that she was, I guess, replacing. I mean, like she didn't know any of the drama behind the scenes. So directing hate toward Jennifer Hale just doesn't make any real sense. All she did, like Zach said, was take a job in an industry that's about as cutthroat as it can get.
Yeah.
Outside of being a mafioso.
Yeah.
In which case you might be literally throat cutted.
Yeah, which is not ideal.
No, not ideal at all.
Well, I think if we're good to move out of the specific drama that kind of spurred the conversation, I think it could be useful to also just bring up two examples of situations that illustrate the real issue that exists when it comes to voice actors. So there's two that Aaron and I have found when we were, kind of looking into this, digging into this a little bit more. And perhaps the more egregious of the two of them, at least in my opinion, is that the voice actor for Mob in Mob Psycho 100, which is an anime. So we're talking about anime, admittedly, and not voice acting for video games in this example.
But I believe in America, it's all under the same union.
Well, so it's all under the same union. Yeah, but sometimes the residuals and stuff are different because voice actors are still in SAG, but if they're on film, they'll still get residuals and some other things.
And for what it's worth, SAG stands for Screen Actors Guild, in case anyone didn't know that.
Yes. We were not just talking about saggy skin.
No.
But the primary voice actor for Mob Psycho tried to, what was it, Aaron? He tried to negotiate between he just wanted Crunchyroll to have a discussion with SAG about getting all of the voice actors on Crunchyroll basically a union contract. He wasn't asking for more pay. The pay wouldn't have actually ended up going up at all. But when he approached Crunchyroll about doing that, they actually ended up just canning him entirely. He got fired.
Yep.
And now, for I believe it's season 3 of Mob Psycho, there's a new voice actor for the main character because Crunchyroll decided to fire the previous one who had done 2 seasons, not because he had asked for more money or been particularly, ungrateful or
demanding.
anything. Yeah, no, it was just, I would like for all of us to have some additional protections through the union.
And for what it's worth, he wasn't even trying to like do a full, to my knowledge, a full like union organizational situation. He was just like approaching the idea, is my understanding. Like, let's see what this can do for us for additional protections, as you said, Zach. And then they just gave him the boot, and I'm like, that's some shit that actually makes Blizzard look a little bit more lenient with their union busting activity.
Yeah, I mean, it's literally someone
that's
saying
hard to do.
Yeah, I mean, it's literally someone saying like, I want more protections. Please at least like humor me and have a conversation about it. And they're like, no, we don't even want to talk about it. Get out. We're offended you brought it up. Yeah,
we're so offended that you do not work here any longer.
Yeah.
Good day, sir.
No, it's
crazy. That's just fucking gross, obviously. So yeah, that one was a tough pill to swallow, and that's a decent lead-in, I think, to talking about, in order to both provide like larger clarity on the entire issue of appropriate compensation in the games industry, especially for performers, and also to provide a little bit more insight into why some of Helena Taylor's claims were a little bit dubious at best, is to talk about like, what are SAG rates? Zachary, please. SAG me.
Well, so the interesting thing with SAG is that we initially, when we were looking through it, I was very confused. I thought that the initial SAG rate when we were first kind of planning this was like $1,000 per hour, and I was like, that's pretty crazy. That's not too bad. This whole conversation might be a little bit rougher for us. Upon rereading it, it's actually roughly $900 to $1,000 per day. And actors are restricted to like roughly 4-hour sessions. And so that ends up being something like $225 to $250 per hour. Which seems like a lot of money until you kind of expand upon it. So like, I did some quick math for you that I ran you through earlier, Aaron.
Thank you. I'm terrible at math.
It's all good because I did it for you. So if you're, on a set that's similar to the one that Helena Taylor was proposed, which was basically 4 to 5 4-hour sessions, you would basically get roughly $3,600 per game for a 4-session recording process. If you have one game that you're working on every single month, not every single year. If you have one game that you're working on every single month, that is only $43,000 annually, which is not very much money at all. And especially when you
to
consider,
live in LA.
Yeah, especially when you consider like, where are these people going to live? They're going to live in LA, they're going to live in San Francisco, they might even live in Austin, Texas. Haha. But my point being is like, they're not making a lot of money.
No.
And half of your job is going to be trying to find new job opportunities. It's not like, you or me, Aaron, where we've got like our 9 to 5 or, insert whatever hour. Like, we get called in, we do our job, and then we get a paycheck. There's a lot of stability there. It is not the same situation for VAs.
No, and I imagine that's same with any sort of performance industry until you crack into it as a huge name. And at this point, it's actually worth bringing up that Bayonetta is not a huge blockbuster series on the level of like Call of Duty or even Battlefield or anything like that. It's kind of a niche sort of franchise. And most of the people who know Helena Taylor's name are the people who played the game. Whereas if you look at other different actors and different voice actors, they may know the name because they're a name. So it's a little bit weird and wonky. So she may still have to do some active searching for high profile roles. So a little bit in her benefit there. But again, she was iconic in that role. But yeah, I mean, $43,000 for, and it is also worth noting that is specifically non-union rates.
No, that is union.
Really?
Because that's SAG. Yeah. You asked about the SAG rates.
That is union. That's my bad. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I got that one completely kerfuffled. Hey, how about it? 50 episodes, still going strong.
That is the protected rate.
That is the protected rate. That's still not great. It's not great, especially since, like we said, so many of these companies are located in these areas. So if you're not living there, then you have to travel, and they may not cover travel costs. So there's a larger conversation to be had about that later. But
well, I mean, it definitely doesn't cover the cost of you practicing for the role in non-studio time. So like any time that you're not in the studio, you're not technically getting paid for.
Exactly. And that's a huge component of it. And if you've found a way to work 16-hour days and get paid for, 4 sessions, each of which will be a couple hours, and live on $43,000 in the fucking Bay Area, then email me because I'd really love to know your secret.
You get a lot of roommates. That's the secret. You live with 20 people.
Roommates.
Yeah.
It's bonkers crazy. So yeah, there's just the entirety of this is just that voice actors in general are underpaid, and the rates get even worse with non-union voice actors, and as we talked about with the Mob Psycho gentleman, as well as voice actors just being cast out, like David Hayter in Metal Gear Solid 5. For different reasons, obviously, but I'm not sure exactly why still. I'm not sure anyone is. The entire art of voice acting seems to be criminally undervalued.
Yeah, and it's only in some situations made worse by the fact, so, kind of flipping to the non-union voice actor side. The research that we did, it seems like a standard rate is pretty similar to the minimum rate that you have as a union voice actor. But the difference is there's no protections. So I can't remember if we've really hit on this in other ways. I know we've definitely talked about like weaponizing passion, but the same kind of thing can play a factor here with non-union voice actors, because like, let's say, let's go back in time. Aaron, you just graduated college. You want to be a voice actor. You know what you need, Aaron? You need voice credits. You need to have voice credits in order to get better and better jobs. What does that mean? Well, are you going to argue with someone, over the phone or in person about how much you should get paid for your first, whatever, 20 roles, I don't know, 5 roles, whatever it is, right? No, you're probably going to like take a really low rate just to get, enough voice credits to kind of get your career started, with the idea that eventually, you'll start asking for more money when you feel like you can justify it. But it's like, as this article from IGN put it, a desperate race to the bottom, because people are just going to keep giving lower and lower bids just to get the role, to the point that some people will be making like literal dollars on the line. And by line, I mean like a dialogue, like a line of dialogue.
Yeah, like on a screenplay.
Yeah, exactly. To get a voice credit.
Yeah, and depending on the scale of the game, that could be, enough to buy you a fucking Wendy's sandwich. But it's definitely interesting to see that, and like on some level, of course, you have to compensate for the fact that an indie studio is not going to have the same budget as a AAA studio. An indie game can hope to sell X number of games, and a AAA studio will hope to sell X number of games to the nth degree. So, there's some give and take there. But making $2 per line, even if you did, 100 games in a month, which is almost physically impossible, you wouldn't be making very much. So like that element of performance is, like I said, criminally undervalued. It's just not across the board. The valuation of the work that goes into making your voice sound good enough to give a performance as if you were someone other than yourself convincingly in a game, they're not valuing that particularly well across the board.
Yeah, it's like in some of these situations, you do what, like 6 lines at an indie rate, which it seems like a fairly common indie rate is like $2 per line.
I've just made $12.
You've made $12. It's like, is that really worth doing it? Like, truthfully, no matter where you are? I mean, I guess kind of, maybe, but like at the same time, what are you're going to buy like, what, 3 Wendy's 4 for 4s? Which I actually have heard that they don't do anymore, but that's a different
I don't
thing.
think they do it anymore. I haven't been to Wendy's in a while. But no, I mean, like, it would... I mean, and it's really easy to make the argument, like, well, if we were to try to transcribe this episode into a screenplay and then pay ourselves $2 for every line that we said in the screenplay version of the podcast, we didn't put that much work in comparison. So, whatever. But, yes, it's an art, and it's someone's livelihood. And it's very different if you've got a friend and you're in college and you're making a game and you get them into the sound booth and they do something and then you buy them a 4 for 4 afterwards as a thank you, as opposed to someone who is a working professional in the industry making pennies for, honing their art and then giving it to you. That's kind of wild. And when you talk about all of these, interesting things, you get this sense that, much like other areas of the games industry, people are being exploited for their passion for the industry. You can take this crap gig and maybe make it big. Hey, that's a good catch line for every sleazy developer.
Yeah. Well, the other thing too that I think's crazy is like going on a per line rate versus like an hourly rate. I feel like is also just kind of a horrible thing to go by, because like, okay, what does a per line mean? What if I say a line, you don't like the delivery of the line? I then have to say the line again. That took more time than
$2 more.
Yeah. It's like, is that a single line or is that 2 lines? And I just thinking about it that way, it's like you could spend easily, I feel like, almost, 4 hours a day not working on that many lines, because, acting isn't this like, you don't just get the line right the first time.
Right.
All the time.
Right.
And it just doesn't make sense. If you do a single line in an hour and you make $2, it's like,
Yeah, no, it's not like Marlon Brando. I mean, when he wasn't extremely drunk, showed up to set every day and every single first take was the best take.
Exactly.
Do you get paid by the hour? Do you get paid by the line? If you're getting paid by the line, do you get paid by the line when it's a retake? There's so many question marks in here that make the entire thing seem really exploitative. And again, if someone offered me $2, I'm not a voice actor by any stretch, as you can tell. But if someone offered me $2 a line to act in The Last of Us Part 3, I'd probably do it. Not that I want to be a voice actor, but I'd probably do it. But if I really wanted to be a voice actor, I'd definitely do it. because then I could put that down on my resume and hope that it would get me a better rate down the line. And the fact of the matter is that the people in charge of these checkbooks know that, and they're using it.
Well, the other thing too is it's a bit of like a there's kind of no other way to put it, but by taking a lower rate, you're kind of screwing over all your other non-union VAs, because then that studio can say, well, insert X person's name took this job for $10 a line or whatever. You want, you want $250 an hour? I don't know. That doesn't seem reasonable.
Yeah.
One of the things the IGN article actually specifically stated is the main reason that the standard rate for non-union VAs in a lot of, it sounds like non-indie roles, is $250 is because people will not take a rate lower than that. Like there is a kind of like communal collective agreement that you do not take a rate lower than that. But obviously if you're new in the industry, it makes sense why you would potentially, it's all manipulating your emotions.
Yeah.
And trying to take advantage of you. I mean, like you said, that's really what it is.
That's why they call it a race to the bottom. It's this aggressive cost cutting. Like if you really want it, you'll do it for less.
Yeah.
And if someone is 2 degrees better than you, but $2.50 more expensive, what's the difference to us? And I'm not trying to paint everyone in a fancy office park as being like some sort of evil cigar smoking, I'm going to screw the people over situation. But it really does smack of that. And that's what we're talking about. We're saying who will do the most work for the least money, and how can we exploit how much they want to do this work to pay them as little as possible.
Yeah. And I think kind of at least my last thing for this segment, just talking about the salaries, I think the most interesting thing that I learned through doing research and listening to some YouTube videos, podcasts, whatever, is that a lot of people get famous and then they'll be a voice actor, right? The majority of their income doesn't come from voice acting. It comes from like Twitch streams or brand deals or getting onto like the conference/convention circuit. Like that's where they make the rest. Like it sounds like the majority of their money, because VA jobs just kind of don't pay well enough. And so can you just imagine, Aaron, like that's like 2 separate jobs completely.
Yeah. Yeah. It's insanity. The fact that you'd work so long and so hard to hone one craft to get to the point where you could use that as supplemental income to your fame. I mean, I guess if it works for some people, sure, fine. I'm not here to tell anyone how to live their life, but that's just bonkers. That's just bonkers to me.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's definitely crazy that you do your main job that you're passionate about so that you can get famous enough to actually make money, but it's not your main job that makes you the money, but it is what makes you famous. Like, I don't know, it just seems really convoluted.
Well, it's actually not that different from like and this veers towards insensitivity, and this will be my last thought on it. It's not that different from, as I brought up earlier to you, Zach, off mic, exploitation films of like the 70s and 80s and 90s, where they'd slap together a shit script and hire a cheap director and then bring on a young, usually buxom woman, often from magazines like Playboy, who had done nude modeling before, and say like, this is your chance to be a star, sweetheart, and then put them in the movie and give them these promises of like fame and prestige, and like, this is your chance to get out of the sleazy sort of nasty porny sort of world that you've been living in and into the mainstream, but we need you to do sleazy, nasty, porny things here, and we're going to pay you pennies. It's just kind of preying on people's desires and expectations to sell copies of something, and it just feels it feels similarly sleazy to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I definitely agree. But unfortunately, it is a complicated issue.
Oh yeah.
It is not so we ran through a lot of those numbers talking about the fact that in reality a lot of those rates are not very good for a lot of the voice actors and especially considering where they tend to live. But certainly not everyone is making no money. And I think one of the good examples of that, as we kind of talk about, the issue being complicated, is just to talk briefly about Michael Hollick, who was one of the primary voice actors for GTA 4. For what's the character's name? I forgot to write it down. It's Nico.
I want to say it's Nico Bellic.
Yeah, I think that's right. So Michael got $100,000 off roughly 5 months of work. I did do a quick adjustment to that though, Aaron, and that is roughly $80K over 12 months, which I'm not saying that's a small amount of money by any means, because it's not, but it is not six figures. That being said,
no.
Huge difference from whatchamacallit, the $43,000 we were kind of talking about earlier. Like $80K, I'd still say in LA and San Francisco is still not like a ton of money because those places are so just oppressively expensive, but it's a lot more money.
No, it's a substantial amount of money. Like if I made $100,000 for doing anything at any point, I'd probably call that a pretty fucking good payday. But I also think like we need to compare that to, and you know where I'm going with this, Zach, obviously, the insane amount of money that GTA 4 brought in and the insane amount of fame. It was one of the biggest games of its time. And it's still well regarded, even though the driving is unfathomably floppy. It is a huge title, and the guy who brought the main character, the face of the video game, the voice behind the face that was the face of the game, only made, shy of $100,000. It seems weird, which brings us to our first layer of unfathomable complication for which we have no answers, which is, should he have made residuals?
Yeah. Should he have made residuals? And to clarify, like, residuals are one of the ways that a lot of voice actors and talent in like film and television make a lot of their money after, a movie or a TV show is released. That doesn't really happen in games. And so the reason we bring up Michael specifically is because he had actually made a comment a while back about how, Rockstar made hundreds of millions of dollars, and, he and his fellow workers didn't see pennies of that success, essentially. It's complicated though, because I don't believe personally, I will take a hard stance on this, and then Aaron, you can kind of respond to it. I don't personally believe that voice actors deserve any kind of additional benefits that developers do not get. And my quick justification of that statement is developers, including criminally underpaid roles like QA.
Yeah.
Well, sometimes criminally underpaid. I don't want to paint in, massive strokes, but do not make anywhere near $80,000 a year to work on a project, and no developers are making residuals on that. The people that are benefiting from the success to a gross degree are going to be like executives and C-suite, et cetera, et cetera. And I don't disagree with Michael's point, but I do not think that just offering voice actors residuals without doing the same or coming up with some kind of payment structure that provides the same incentivization to all developers is going to be successful in games. Because it just, honestly, it's kind of pitting the two sides against each other, and this kind of like almost class warfare-esque thing of like, voice actors deserve residuals, but the developers don't. And it's like, what? To be fair, I don't think anyone's saying developers don't, but that's kind of like the read between the lines feeling that people have around this topic.
Yeah. I mean, so at this point, we also need to like fully separate this whole thing from the film industry, which is just its own beast, and it needs to kind of just sit over there in the corner for a minute, because if we talk about that too in depth, we have to get into a lot of other numbers, and we just don't have the time for it, and we still won't arrive at any answers. So my philosophy is, how much of a game is made in live production, right? So how much of it is actually, cinematographers on set doing mocap, actors on set in the mocap suits, voice actors in the studio providing the voice to the characters, and how much of it is combat designers and level designers and concept artists and texture artists and 3D modelers and programmers and systems designers and tools designers, and how much of that can you value against an iconic voice? So I would hesitantly agree that a voice actor should not be given residuals over anyone else involved in the production at a serious capacity. It's extremely hard to say that the amount of effort that they put in is more demanding than what a programmer does, like I said, or a designer or an artist.
Yeah.
But how do we value? There's no answer to that question. So in my opinion, if you're going to give residuals to one group, you need to give it to most, if not all. If you're going to give it to none, then give it to none. Because, and this leads us weirdly into another one, which is, do voice actors carry the same sort of cachet that an on-screen actor does?
Yeah.
So I pitched this idea where it's like, okay, picture your favorite actor. How many movies have you gone to because your favorite actor, your favorite director was directing it or acting in it? That can be a draw. That's why they have those names right on top of all of the theatrical posters. This one stars Timothée Chalamet. This one stars Joaquin Phoenix. This one stars Tom Hanks. This one stars John fucking Cusack. This one stars fucking Brendan Fraser. Like, it's that can be a draw. That can be a huge draw that will ask people, like, it will move people to spend $15 on a ticket. If it's not on cheap movie day, or depending on where you live.
Yeah.
That can be a huge draw. Did anyone buy The Last of Us just because Troy Baker was voicing Joel? I don't know. I'm sure someone did. I didn't. Did his performance absolutely solidify the game as one of the best examples of incredible voice performances? Yes. Same with Christopher Judge for God of War, and dare I hope the upcoming God of War Ragnarok, which by the time you're listening to this comes out in, I want to say, 4 days. Their contributions are incredible and invaluable, which makes it hard to value them.
Yeah.
But I also don't think that those names necessarily bring the same thing as, like, everyone's favorite piece of, like, extremely chiseled white bread, Chris Pratt. It's he can sell a movie with having his name on it.
Well, it's also a matter of, like, without can you have a video game without a voice actor? Yes. You can. Can you have a game without mechanics? No. You literally cannot. So in terms of, like, companies prioritizing money and where they want to spend money and I completely understand the lower evaluation of voice talent in comparison to developers, right? So I get that 100%. I mean, the example that Matt gave in the Bellular video, just because you mentioned God of War, is like, could God of War have been a good game without as great voice acting talent? Probably. Could it have been a good game without the Leviathan axe being, like, as crisp and satisfying as it was? I think without that weapon feeling as good as it does, that game would have suffered immensely more than if the voice acting was not good. And to clarify, none of this is to say that voice acting is not important, because voice acting and audio in general is an incredibly important thing. It's just to say that I understand why companies don't want to give, for example, residuals to voice actors when they don't even give residuals to their developers, who are, I think, I don't think there's a way to say that developers don't contribute more to a game. Like, I really hope that doesn't offend anyone, but just even if you look at the amount of hours, if Helena Taylor was going to put a total of 16 hours of her life into Bayonetta to record all of her lines, that's not even a full 2 weeks of work.
Depending on how much a developer is crunching, even. You know, some of these people are putting in more than 80 hours a week.
Yeah.
You know, and it's the biggest problem is it's just apples and oranges. We can, you know, try and find common elements of it, but how do you, it goes back to what I said. How do you value value? What does one thing bring to the conversation more than the other? What sells the most copies, which is the business perspective of it. From the artistic perspective, I think we can say everything's about even and everything should be paid evenly. But unfortunately, video games aren't made to make art. They're made to make money.
And it's also such a, like, moving scale, right? Because let's look at, like, Tall Tale. Those games rely so heavily on voice acting to be good. If the voice acting in those games was bad, it would impact it so much more, because, you know, there's not really a ton of gameplay in it. So the voice actors are way more important in selling the story, keeping you engaged, da-da-da-da-da. So it's not like a consistent thing.
But I mean, at the same time, who came up with, like, okay, let's put a timer on this decision. Let's see where this decision branches. The narrative designers of those games contribute just as much, if not more, to those games' effectiveness as the voice actors do. And I think that's part of the difficulty with, you know, front-facing versus behind-the-scenes contributions to a production. So if you look at something like Hamilton, it makes sense that Lin-Manuel Miranda would get rich from Hamilton, because he wrote the fucking thing and he performed it.
Mm-hmm.
It makes sense. He faces the front and he did all the legwork that you never saw. Obviously, he had a team with him, but he did both of those things. Now, if Tom Hanks shows up for the new Pinocchio movie that I guess is out, I have no idea what the critical reception was, because as soon as I saw the first trailer, I couldn't have given less of a shit. But did Tom Hanks sell tickets to that movie? Probably. And that's what a business is going to value more than Jeremy the animator. Like, almost certainly they're going to value Tom Hanks being in the movie and his face facing forward. How many rom-coms from the 90s do you remember the director or writer of? And how many do you remember as, like, a Meg Ryan movie? It's just about how we value. And in terms of video games, because so much of it is in the trenches production and not performance, in my opinion, occupies about the exact same level of the pie chart as actual development. I mean, but arguably there is an argument for less, there's an argument for more, but it's just so hard to wrap your brain around that's why we decided to, like, make this entire last section about how confusing it is, because it's just an Ouroboros. It's a snake eating its own tail. There's no real answer to any of these questions, because everything that is involved in trying to find an answer is so inherently subjective.
Well, the other thing too that makes it complicated is, like, okay, there is the potential that, you know, going with just the minimum union rate, that you only get one job a month. But if you get 2 jobs a month and you're working 4-hour sessions, because you can do that, that's a lot more money that month. And so the ability for you as a voice actor to kind of have multiple projects that you're working on and it not being as much of a time consuming thing potentially, unlike developers who, are basically kind of locked in, because oftentimes there's also non-competes, which make it difficult. You have the potential to make a lot of money on a bunch of different projects. Like, I don't know if Michael Hollick, who we referenced earlier with GTA 4, I don't know if he only worked on GTA 4 for that whole 15-month period, but I would venture to bet that he had other irons in the fire, so to speak. So he probably did not only make $80K that year. He probably made quite a bit more money. And, that's fine. Like, I think my biggest thing, and the thing that I would put my foot down on, is I think whatever rate you pay voice actors needs to be a rate that if they only had one project a month, they could survive comfortably. I think that should be the goal, because, and we literally have this in our section here as an easy layup, the reason this is so complicated to resolve is because we live in a society, to kind of say the meme. We live in a society. That society utilizes capitalism. Capitalism makes it very difficult for everyone to have residuals. It doesn't set, or else let's even just take it out of games, like P&G. Like, what if there was a similar disagreement in P&G? Like, everyone at P&G supports all of the products. So if one product does well, shouldn't everybody there, make some kind of, increase in income? And sometimes that's the case because of raises and whatever, right? But my whole point being, like, the real solution here is pay executives less. Don't incentivize, profit for profit's sake in the way that we do in capitalism. But at the moment, like, if games don't make people money, and by people I mean investors money, investors aren't going to invest in games, and then games won't happen. So capitalism is really the enemy here. But, like, that's a massive conversation, and I've already looked at my waveform and how long I've been talking, and we simply do not have the wherewithal to, I think, dive into all of that. This is not a podcast about fighting capitalism necessarily.
If we wanted to dissect a lot of that stuff, it would take us way longer. But what you just said has reminded me of an interesting excerpt from, I've been reading a book by the second patron saint of Some Patches Required, Jason Schreier, and it's called Press Reset, and it's a book about studio shutdowns and how people deal with that, how they get into it. And one very interesting story that kind of illustrates that point came from a story about the development of Dead Space 3. And that was obviously an EA situation, but developed by Visceral. And Visceral had made Dead Space. It sold just well enough to get a sequel, but then they made it a little bit more action-oriented in hopes of making more money. And then they wanted Dead Space 3 to be even more action-oriented in order to make even more money, because since EA is publicly traded, the only acceptable result is exponential growth. So clearing cost of production and then making a couple $1 million is considered failure. Keep that in mind. And as they were talking about layoffs, they were discussing the fact that, and to quote, the company's cost hovered around $16,000 a person per month, a number that might include salary and other expenses. At that estimate, a staff of 100 people would cost more than $19 million a year. That's a lot of money, but in 2012, and this is another quote, in 2012, EA Chief Executive Officer John Riccatello made $9.5 million, while Frank Gabot made $9.8 million, according to SEC filings. Just those two people not making that much money could have funded the entire studio for more than a year. And that's not to count everybody else in the executive building right across the street from Visceral. So why are those people making that much fucking money when developers are getting laid off and their projects are being canceled? Yeah. Again, it's really sad to just always fall back on bad capitalism bad. capitalism in general leads to bad capitalism. So it's very difficult to have this conversation in any sort of in-depth way. So if you want to dig deeper into that side of the argument, or that entire aspect of the conversation, I wholeheartedly encourage you to pick up Press Reset. And yes, I realize this makes me sound like a corporate shill for Jason Schreier, but it's got a lot of very enlightening stories that kind of illustrate in much more depth and with much more personal stories the kind of things we're talking about with this angle. So yeah, in the long and the short of it, I guess, is that voice actors should be appropriately compensated, but you could argue that unions aren't doing as good a job as they should of negotiating advantageous rates. Voice actors who have become names have built their own advantage, so they can negotiate more advantageous rates. And we have no idea whether Helena Taylor was just terrible at communicating or outright lying. Either way, what she said brought up something important that we should all keep in mind. How do we value what each individual brings to the game, and can we value them more?
Yeah, and I would say, as we're getting to the end of the segment here, and there's honestly way more that could be covered, but we just don't have time to do it.
Oh, so much more.
Yeah, but as we get to the end of the segment, there is no question as to whether voice actors are underappreciated. That is a thing that is happening. There are plenty of them being taken advantage of, underpaid, etc. That is a thing that is 100% going on. And I just want to reiterate that, because this last segment was very much about how it's a complicated issue in terms of like why we can't just like necessarily just do one thing over the other. Especially if there's the possibility that giving residuals to voice actors could impact the pay of developers negatively. Certainly that's not really a solution. So to finalize that, just wanted to say there is a real issue with this. It is worth looking into, digging into. There's a lot of cool YouTube videos, books, etc. you can find. But also is just to say that, and of course, as I'm about to say it jumps out of my brain.
That's fine. I can vamp for a sec.
No, I've got it. It's coming back to me. It's coming back to me.
All coming back to me.
But the final thing is just that SAG should be the organizing body to do better by their members. And I think that they're also the ones that understand how voice actors should be properly compensated, and how much effort and how much time and energy they go into things. I think it's very hard as a non-voice actor, like Aaron and I, to really have a good understanding of the amount of time that goes into a single project. And SAG should know how to represent their members better. And generally speaking, it sounds like a lot of people aren't very satisfied with their representation with SAG. So
yeah, which harkens back to a previous conversation we had about the fact that unions were born out of the need to protect workers from the companies they work for, because a company that can make more money by paying less will always do so. And that does not mean that unions are perfect, clearly, as evidenced by the fact that SAG rates may not actually be keeping people where they need to be. But, that's the society we live in. Anywho, I think without going much deeper down any other given rabbit hole, we should probably start the closeout process. What do you think?
I am all good. And I can start the closeout process by saying we have a fairly large announcement that we are making, which is that this is actually the final episode. Episode 50 is the final episode of season 1 of SPR. Just to clarify, we are not ending. We have full intention of coming back. We don't know exactly how long the hiatus is going to be. I'll make sure to keep that communicated on Twitter. But there are some organizational things that we want to do and some things we think we can do a little bit better with the show. So we're going to be working on that for a little bit.
Yeah. Outside of the fact that I will not be involved because, of course, I will be Liam Hemsworth. By the way, did anyone get that joke? Zach, did you get that joke?
That's the Geralt of Rivia switch,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. No, I followed you.
So secondary announcement, I will not be replaced by Liam Hemsworth. That was just a bad joke because he will be replacing Henry Cavill as Geralt of Rivia in Netflix's The Witcher. So that was just kind of a fun thing that I did. Haha. You can always trust me for great, terrible comedy. But yeah, no, we're just gonna take a little bit of time off, continue to meet regularly and discuss ways that we can change the show. Because like Zach said, there's some operational stuff, some structuring things that we want to figure out to make sure that we can make this show as good as possible. And that has been our intention alongside having fun with it for the last 50 episodes. So I guess... and that was not a pre-cry sniff, although I am going to say something super genuine. If you have listened to us from the beginning, the fact that we made it to 50 episodes is fucking bonkers to me. It's kind of surreal that we're recording episode 50, even though technically we've recorded 51 episodes. Although the other one may not.
There's some other ones that will never see the light of day.
Yeah, that may never see the light of day. But the fact, maybe 52 or 53 at that point. But the fact that we've kept this thing going as consistently as possible is something that I'm honestly proud of. And I struggle to say that because I'm not usually proud of many things. But thank you for sticking with us or hopping on at whatever point you hopped on. And we will be back, hopefully better, and hopefully a little bit more refined. And I hope that you will join us for season 2 when that eventually comes to fruition.
Yeah. And then I
Won't
guess...
be too long, though.
For the last time, during this season at least, I would like to thank our wonderful logo artist, album cover artist, however you want to refer to it. eDougie Art is amazing. Please go check out her work on Etsy or on Instagram under the same name, and that is at eDougie Art. We really appreciate her and all of the support that she gave us when we were making the podcast and during season 1. So please make sure to show some love.
Yeah. Obviously, huge thank you to eDougie Art. And an equally huge thank you to Beach Girl, the fine purveyor of great digital music and the individual who gave us our wonderful intro and outro music. You can listen to Beach Girl on Spotify, SoundCloud, Bandcamp, wherever you find, better digital music than a lot of the other stuff that's out there. And don't get me wrong, there's some stinkers on Bandcamp, but Beach Girl is not one of them. Sorry, that was terrible. That
was an interesting end to that segment.
No. Beach Girl and eDougie Art were the first two people that we reached out to when we decided we wanted to start the show, and we honestly could not be more happy that they were happy to help us out. So thank you to both of them. Check out Beach Girl anywhere you can find fine digital music. And my actual last thank you is to Zach. Sorry for blindsiding you with this one, but when you reached out to me initially during the height of the pandemic and said you were interested in starting a podcast, it kind of came out of the blue for me, and I was really happy. And it's been a fun journey so far, and I cannot possibly see having done this show with anyone else, and I can't wait to see where it takes the two of us next.
Yeah, no, thank you, Aaron. Sorry for blindsiding you. No, it's been a great opportunity. It's been a great opportunity to work on this project. We you the listener can't hear all of our internal conversations when we're planning for different things and whatnot, but it's been a really cool opportunity to have a consistent project where for the most part we've released stuff on time, I think with one exception. And it's definitely been a labor of love that kept us both sane, I think, during the majority of the pandemic when we couldn't do other things. So yeah, here's to 50. Here's to 50 episodes. Here's to 50 more. And
50 more.
We'll keep everybody posted.
Absolutely. Also, last weird plug, please go vote. Because this will come out before voting day. So if you're in a state where House representatives are up, please vote. And I think Senate's up in all 50. So please vote.
Yep, I'm going to do that tomorrow.
Anyway, that was a weird tonal shift on my part, but I wanted to say it and I forgot about it. But yeah. Anyway, thank you to everybody. Thank you, Zach. And thank you to, Oprah and my mom. And the Academy. I'm gonna go slap Chris Rock.
Have a good night, everyone.
Goodbye. Thank you again. Thank you, Zach, for thanking me to remind me to thank more people. Thank Nathan Fillion. And God, but probably not. Have you stopped recording yet?